what caused the fires.
I know, and you know, I would guess the most likely thing is that there was an electrical, fire and the winds made it spread. That's the most likely thing. But why shouldn't you have a conspiracy theory when they're not telling you anything and they're purposely lying to cover for...
I also don't know why that's a conspiracy theory when you're just positing possibilities, meaning like it's not impossible, and you're not saying that it actually happened.
Well, from the very beginning, people were saying like Oprah burned things down so she could...
Well, I mean, that kind of stuff is crazy. Like Oprah, I feel like has better things. I mean, she does own a space laser, so I mean, theoretically you could. But you don't even need to go that far. First of all, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have spent any time in Maui or in Lahaina. So that used to be because we were on the West Coast. That was like my family's getaway every single year. So we were in Lahaina like 7 out of 10 years. And it is just a spectacular little town. It was a wonderful place to hang out. And it was always packed to the brim this time of year because that's where you would go to watch the sunset. I mean, it's just a gorgeous place. And the fact that it burned down this quickly is really insane. It has nothing to do with climate change, by the way. Every climatologist will tell you, if they're worth their salt, it has nothing to do with climate change. The temperature there is incredibly variable. They've had a very dry summer. They had a very wet winter. They had a very dry summer. But what this always comes down to, for me, every single time, is government mismanagement of these disasters. And you know the way you can tell is when they start blaming the other stuff, right? So when there was a hurricane that hit Florida and knocked out a bridge, the bridge got rebuilt inside of 2 days and things got fixed. When the same hurricane then moved up into the Northeast and flooded part of the Northeast, the media spent the next week talking about how climate change was responsible for the fact that there was flooding in the streets of New Jersey, as though the human failures there had nothing to do with anything. The human failures here are astonishing. I mean, astonishing. There's an article from the AP today where they go into detail about what it was like to be in Lahaina and what exactly was happening on a minute-to-minute basis. The cops set up perimeters around Lahaina because there's only one road in and one road out of Lahaina. It's really hard to get in and get out. That's particularly true if you're on Front Street, which is the part that's like right by the water. And it's a very crowded place all the time. And they were telling people to turn back because there were downed electrical wires. So you're talking about like triaging a problem. How about like direct people around the electrical wires? The people who disobeyed the cops lived. The people who listened to the cops who went back to Lahaina died because all of the winds just picked up and rammed right through it.
Yeah, that's why the question is not, well, there is a question of what started the fires, but to me, no matter what started them, even if environmentalists did start them, the bigger question is why was the fire? Why did it kill 1,000 people or more?
Why did they close the only roads out?
Right.
I'm not suggesting that it couldn't have simply been incompetence. It probably was incompetence. But you can certainly see why people would conclude, something's a little screwy here. Is there something more going on?
This is the way you solve the problem of disinformation, as Obama always wants to solve that problem by cutting out everybody who has an opinion different from his. That's how he defines disinformation and misinformation. The way you solve misinformation is by telling the freaking truth. If you were the authorities, get the information, spread it to the people. Then when other people come up with crazy conspiracy theories, they sound like crazy conspiracy theories. Now, crazy conspiracy theories sound like perfectly reasonable explanations because the government is constantly
Did you hear what the mayor
lying.
of Maui says? The mayor of Maui was confronted by a reporter in a small press gaggle. What were there? Half a dozen reporters there. And here was his answer on how many kids are dead.
Children are missing. You know.
I knew the answer to that. I would be happy to answer that.
You have no estimate as to how many children are missing?
I guess we can end this right now if you guys want. Sorry,
this is one of the biggest questions that the people of Lahaina have, but you don't want to answer.
It always takes one or two to ruin it for everybody.
Please, this is our first, this is our only
Well, we could say that about you. You ruined it for everybody.
You're welcome to say it. You're the media. You can say whatever you want.
You're a disaster.
All right. Okay.
Please.
You've been the worst mayor we could possibly imagine.
You won't even wait.
Respect what? This is the most dismal response we've ever had.
You won't wait for your turn. You want to shout over these guys that are legitimate.
Why don't you give them the real answers then?
So.
Give them the real answers.
That's not his question.
Let him.
Yeah. You can go. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You know, one guy asking a tough question, not even a tough, basic question, ruins it for everybody. I guess this is my other question. Even if you could say, well, the cops shut down the roads because they just had no idea what they were doing and there were down power lines. How is it? I mentioned earlier, 3,000 people die on 9/11. Here we're looking at 1,000 people, as it seems to be the estimate. A third of the worst tragedy in American history, and the media basically black it out?
They blacked it out.
Why are they blacking it out?
I know.
I mean, the part, again, I just come back to the insanely obvious double standard with regard to Biden. Like let's
To
protect
Biden, basically?
100%. 100%. Or the governor of Hawaii, who's a Democrat.
Yeah.
Or the mayor of Maui, who's a Democrat.
Or the senators who are Democrats.
I promise you that if this had happened in Florida, all you would get morning till night is Ron DeSantis is to blame for this. His emergency management response has been dismal. Where was he if George W. Bush if Donald Trump were president and he didn't show up for 2 weeks while he was on vacation? I promise you, every single waking media moment. And then if you went there and started telling fibs about how I had a kitchen fire, like it's just, it's the most egregious possible thing. And this is the one area where I think if you're going to say that Republicans have sort of a prayer of a hope, it is that the Democrats have created such an immense bubble around Joe Biden that he believes he can get away with legitimately anything. Yep. And there may come maybe he can, or maybe there will come a point where he can't. Maybe there will come a point where it doesn't matter almost to the Republican. I think this is part of the logic behind Trump. Many of the Republicans are like, well, you know what? In the end, it's not going to matter who we nominate because Biden is so eminently beatable, and there's just such a wellspring of dislike for the guy.
And that may be true.
That's not totally implausible.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is that they've been lying on his behalf for years on end. He's presided over the worst foreign policy disaster of my lifetime in the pullout of Afghanistan. He's presiding over one of the worst natural disasters of my lifetime in Hawaii. I think the economic disaster over which he's presiding is being soft-pedaled. What we are watching right now in the economy in the next 6 months is going to come to fruition.
It's working.
All of that, I think that's the hope for Republicans, is that it almost doesn't matter who you nominate. I don't know why you'd want to take the risk. It seems to me the thing you'd want to do is nominate the person who has the best shot of beating Joe Biden. But I certainly understand the feeling, which is the dual appeal of maybe he's so weak anybody can beat him, and also screw you guys. That's a pretty strong emotional
very powerful.
appeal.
It's very powerful.
Very strong emotional appeal.
Yes.
I think I'm open to the theories that there was malice and that some of this was intentional. I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid thing. We need to explore it. But right now, if I had to pick a theory, it just seems to be this is bureaucracy. Like, it exists to not work. It exists to diffuse responsibility. No one's held accountable. And so in this case, you've just got all these different. You've got the power company. You've got the police. You have local. You have the local government. You have the people in charge of the water, and you've got this woke guy that was on record saying that, when we're distributing water, we want to make sure we take into account equity. So you've got all these various different realms that in a moment like this need to work together and need to communicate in a competent way, and they just don't. It completely breaks down.
My problem with this theory, though, is that for years we've said bureaucracy doesn't work, bureaucracy is the problem, we need to dismantle the bureaucracy. But I'll tell you what, this bureaucracy, the federal bureaucracy, seems to work pretty well when it comes to rounding up Midwestern grannies from January 6th.
Yeah.
I think the bureaucracy works pretty well when it comes to imprisoning political dissidents and the lawyers for Donald Trump and who is currently the chief political rival to the president. The bureaucracy seems to work pretty well spying on Catholic masses and arresting pro-lifers and trying to throw pro-lifers in prison for 11 years that they're doing right now. 11 years pro-lifers are facing a completely unjust trial because they had the audacity to oppose abortion. So in many ways, the federal bureaucracy seems to be working too well.
When they want
to
it
defend itself. To defend itself.
Yeah,
that's what it does.
They didn't care enough to. This is that's politics, but this being ready for a disaster is a practical concern where you have to actually care about the lives of human beings.
And when DeSantis was available to help Florida after a hurricane, they called it this is his Katrina.
When Ted Cruz went to Cancun, he's a senator, he's not a governor. He went to Cancun when there was a freeze, a cold freeze in Texas. And the media declared that this meant that Ted Cruz did not give a crap about anybody except himself and his family. Joe Biden goes on vacation for 2 weeks. And he's going back to vacation now. And he's declaring a lid every single day. And meanwhile, his FEMA team is going, well, it's really up to the localities to handle this sort of thing. It's just, it's insanity to me. And I understand, again, what I keep coming back to for Republicans, I get it. I get the feeling that inevitably the pendulum has to swing back the other way and the bad people have to get clocked. I totally get it. But there's no rule that says that's true. So,
right.
The notion that the unjust will pay their price.
Well, there is something to this, because the thing that the Democrats have done repeatedly, they call it the Curley effect. They basically chase the non-Democrat voters out of localities by making it so unlivable there that the only people left are the people who will vote for them. So you get the doom loop in San Francisco. That actually works if you happen to be in government, because the only people left in San Francisco will be the people who will vote you back into office every single time, because they're doing fine. They're living on the streets. That's where they want to be. That actually works. The problem is it doesn't work for the entire nation, because there's nowhere for the entire nation to go. People in California can go to Florida. People in America got nowhere to go. So ultimately, this government is now so corrupt, so unresponsive, and so dishonest in dealing with the public that there is some chance that the people will just say, you know what, we've had it. They did it with Reagan. They did it with Giuliani in New York. They may well do it again.
The member-exclusive portion of our show continues now at dailywire.com. If you are not a member, if you're just one of those freeloading hoi polloi watching now on one of these despicable social networks, head on over, click the link in the description, subscribe right now. We will see you there.